You build it big.
However, getting the water to Constantinople was only half the battle. Once in the city, the water had to be stored, but vacant land was scarce. Byzantine engineers answered the challenge by building an underground storage system more elaborate than anything else in the ancient world. Over time, they would construct more than 150 subterranean tanks. The largest would be here, the Basilica Cistern. It would take 336 columns to support its 25-foot-tall ceiling. At 153 yards long and 77 yards wide, the Basilica Cistern could hold enough water to fill 27 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Engineers built the underground storage tanks in troughs between the city's hills, an ingenious solution that not only made use of the lowland, but also provided a flat building surface on top.
The cisterns enabled the city to be provided continuously by water, even in the summer when it wouldn't rain that much and there'd be merely a trickle coming down from the aqueduct.
With its vast underground water storage system, Constantinople's population swelled to an extraordinary size for an ancient city.
By the end of the 5th century, the population of Constantinople was approaching the 500,000 mark.
No other city in Western Europe came even close.
It was a city that was legendary, even for people who had never set foot in it.
But far away on the steppes of Mongolia, a tidal wave is about to engulf Europe. The surge would be led by a man named Attila, and his army would soon be at the gates of Constantinople. It will take a brilliant feat of military engineering, the greatest defense system of antiquity, to save the city. Saint Nicholas, the original Santa Claus, was a bishop in the Byzantine Empire. During the 4th century, he was known for secret gift-giving. 410 AD, Rome has fallen to Germanic tribes called Visigoths. Roman citizens fled eastward to the safe haven of Constantinople. But it was only a matter of time before a savage horde, hell-bent on destruction, would come knocking. They were called the Huns.
Now, as the West will decline, the East and Constantinople will become a boom town. Only burr in the saddle is, the richer Constantinople gets, the more those marauding northern tribes who have been attacking Italy start to look at Constantinople and go,
Constantine the Great had put the Byzantine Empire on the map. Now the Huns sought to wipe it off.
The descriptions of them in contemporary texts, which treat them as outlandish, horrible, ugly, beastly people, make it very clear that ordinary people are absolutely terrified of the Huns.
But the Byzantines had a plan in mind to keep out the Huns. Perched on the tip of a peninsula, Constantinople had strategic advantages over the old capital, Rome, which stood unprotected and exposed. To keep out its enemies, Constantinople would need formidable defenses along its vulnerable western approach. The solution? The strongest, most sophisticated system of city walls ever built. Today they are known as the Theodosian Walls. Ironically, credit for the ancient world's greatest feat of military engineering goes to an emperor who was a mere child when the walls were conceived, Theodosius II. Construction on Constantinople's defenses began when Theodosius was just 12 years old. It was his prefect, Anthemius, who deserves the real credit for masterminding the walls. Romans had been building walls for hundreds of years, but Byzantine engineers faced an even greater challenge. Constantinople sat on a fault, and earthquakes were a constant problem. But how to build something that would withstand a tremor? The answer? Limestone mortar.
In the West, Romans used concrete, which created a mortar of stone-like hardness that is rigid once it sets. Lime mortar has a little bit of give to it so that it will allow the buildings to settle without significant breakage.
The Byzantines' ingenious design used limestone mortar alternated with bands of brick and stone. First, square stone walls were laid and filled in with brick rubble and mortar. To bind the layers of stone and mortared rubble together, bands of brick 5 courses thick were laid throughout the width of the walls.
The hidden advantage of that also is that it provides a certain flexibility against minor earth tremors, because the addition of the brick breaks up the solid face of the wall and allows the wall to absorb shock without shattering.
Using this layer technique, the Byzantines built a massive barrier, more than 30 feet tall and as much as 16.5 feet thick. It would have 96 giant towers reaching heights of 60 feet or more. But would it be enough to hold off the Huns?
General William Tecumseh Sherman said about the Comanche Indians, the best equestrians of latter years, that they'd been on a horse for so long it looked like they didn't know how to walk. Well, the Huns were the granddaddies of the Comanche. They lived, breathed, and died by the horse. They developed the stirrup, which allowed them to stand up in the saddle and sling arrows and swords with a deadly accuracy. They rode from China to India to Europe, plundering and terrorizing, feasting on raw meat, which they tenderized between their thighs as they rode, dressed in the skins of field mice, which they wore until those skins rotted off. Let me put it this way. Attila and the Huns gave a new meaning to the word fierce.
He was very good at what he did. He was very good at raping and pillaging and breaking down the defenses of the Roman Empire.
In the first 7 years of his reign, much of Europe fell to Attila and his Huns. But despite repeated attempts, Attila had yet to capture Constantinople. He would get a little help from Mother Nature. In 447 AD, a series of catastrophic earthquakes rocked the city, far worse than anything Byzantine engineers had anticipated. It was the opportunity Attila had been waiting for. 57 towers were leveled by the tremors, leaving the city unprotected. Attila's army was once more on the march, threatening Constantinople. From the rubble, Emperor Theodosius rallied Constantinople's people to help not only rebuild the defenses, but to make them even more formidable than before. But with the Hun army fast approaching, thousands of citizens had only weeks to repair walls that had taken years to build. But the Byzantines would take no chances. The new and improved Theodosian walls would now incorporate a triple line of defense.
There must have been an enormous amount of planning, a lot of engineering skill. For its period, it was the most complex and expensive defensive system in the world outside of China.
The first hurdle, a giant moat. Beyond that, an outer terrace. Next, a brand new outer wall, 10 feet tall and 6.5 feet thick. The final and by far the most impressive line of defense would be the original massive inner wall, completely rebuilt and anchored by its 96 giant towers.
Each tower is its own individual little castle. So to conquer the walls of the city, it would mean penetrating the moat, the outer walls, the inner wall, 3 lines of defense, and then conquering all of these individual castles one by one.
It's an extremely clever system. All the angles, all the possibilities for the technology of the time are covered.
The work was completed just in time.